Welcome to today's video, or should I say this month's video, since I haven't uploaded in ages. I also tried to make this video earlier, but demotivation kicked in, and I also kind of tried to perfect it and read the take a bunch of different times. Even though it's just supposed to be me talking to the camera, I overthink a lot of things when I'm making these videos, so I do hope you stick around and enjoy. But I'm just going to be playing some Minecraft while I talk about antisexualism and what prompted me to get into the antisexuals community. So I want to start off by saying that a lot of antisexuals are autistic, and I am included. How do I know this, you may ask? Well, I know that a lot of antisexuals are autistic because I have heard from a bunch of different online communities about people who are antisexual and their sensory experiences and their autistic experiences, which is really, really interesting because I feel like antisexualism and autism would go hand in hand because autism can have a lot of, sensory issues, so there could be that aspect of physical touch and repulsion because of that. But also, autistic people don't just blindly follow the norms. They don't blindly follow things that other people think are fine because everyone else does them. Autistic people kind of do their own thing anyway, and I think that's really important and really special. I feel like autistic people might be able to stay quote-unquote innocent for longer as well, and that's not always true, so don't get mad at me, that's not always true. But a lot of autistic people like to continue to watch things like Disney and all sorts into adulthood, regardless of what the expectation of what they should be doing is. My autism, though, as well as being a benefit and a key for me to getting into the anti-sex community, was also a massive kind of downgrade to my life in the beginning, because my old school was not at all understanding of my difficulties. In fact, they thought that because I was completely, I could talk, I was articulate, I could do the work, I could be the model student, I was doing fine. But just because you can do that doesn't mean you don't have internal turmoil. And I had a lot of internal turmoil throughout those many years when I was in mainstream school. And I think what would have really helped me is if I had been able to get some therapy probably sooner, because I know that anti-sex, a lot of OCD complain to anti-sex as well, which, I understand. I also do think, obviously, it is kind of objectively gross, the act of sex, but it is a little bit OCD. But the people who were supposed to help me with my OCD, which also encompasses health anxiety, generalized anxiety, which I also happen to have, unfortunately, village over there. The people who we first called when I was 8 years old, which was ages ago, and I was actually self-harming back then, even then, because I believed that if I could harm myself, I could get back at myself for any wrongs I did, which is really sad at the age of 8. But the people who my parents originally called, they were like, no, we can't help this kid because they are autistic, and anxiety and autism go together all the time, which is complete bullcrap, because I've heard stories of plenty of autistic adults who are extremely happy and doing really well, and are just all engrossed in their own autistic obsessions and stuff, and they're not phased. And even if it was part of autism, they should probably have at least tried to give you the best life possible. That reminds me of people who have illnesses, physical illnesses and disabilities. They don't just give up on them. They will try and give them the best life possible. Why is a mental disability any different? It shouldn't be. And I don't know why this person thought that it would be. But regardless, that was in the past. Eventually, even after my teachers from my mainstream school tried to encourage these ableist people to not help me and not give me an autism plan, because I was trying to get an autism plan to get into a different school. But even after that, I did actually manage to get a plan, which I'm so happy about. I did actually manage to get a plan. I think that school still sticks with me. It really does, because that school is also the school that did the horrible sex education that I will never get out of my mind. The one I described earlier. And I feel like that's going to stick with me forever, because it is now, ingrained in my memory, the way they described it. and I can't think of it any differently anyway. They basically just glorified it. So, some schools are pretty ridiculous in the way they do it as well, where they kind of like advocate for quote-unquote purity and abstinence, but that's not real purity and abstinence, because what they actually do is they encourage you not to do it until you get married, which is disgusting, because that's fake innocence, that's faking purity. What purity and innocence actually is not doing it at all, because, it's not innocent and it's not pure in any way. It's animalistic and it's disgusting and it's a conscious just bad act. It's like, I don't even know, it's a source of so many different crimes in the world, and it's a source of so much suffering and so much lack of personality in humans these days. And it's really sad to see people act like that. But my school basically, they just glorified it. They made it. I think they intentionally made it cringe. But for me, it wasn't just cringe. It was horrifying and abhorrent and scary. And after I left that school, I finally got a place in a different school, which was essentially a school for quote-unquote bad kids, like, the aspiring roadmen, gangster people. I'm joking, but the people who didn't fit in mainstream school and people who were struggling. And the mainstream school didn't accept. They were like, F you, get off our property, go to this special school that's just for, dodgy children. And I went there, and it was kind of like, it was a lot better than the mainstream school, I have to say. Smaller class, more teachers in case someone had a meltdown, which is really useful. And they didn't appear to do sex education from, the small time that I was there, which was really, really handy. Or they did have these, gross sex health portraits on the wall, which I told the teachers needed to be taken down, because I was not coming to school if they were going to be there. I did not come there to be have my eyes assaulted by these freaky pictures. And they did. They explained to me what they were for, but I don't think sex and safety is something that should ever go together, to be honest, because they are completely different things and completely different topics. So yeah, that was one thing that happened there. That was the first not so good thing, the posters. The other not so good thing was that the teachers, I was still different. I'm still a strange case. They did not understand me either. They did try. They did take me out when I was having a meltdown, but there were still other kids in the class, and because I now had this thing where I believed that if I could distance myself from people physically, I could distance myself from the entire concept of sex, which I know is kind of a weird thing to think, but it helped me, or so I thought it helped me back then, and I still kind of do. But what I did to enforce this for myself was I put a bit of cardboard up between the two desks, and I would also happen to stick a Minecraft camel sticker on the cardboard, just to, I don't know, make it more personalised. They noticed that I was a right weirdo, and they eventually got me out of that school. I didn't even really know what was happening, I don't think. They just told me one day that I could leave, and then the next day I never went back. And I ended up going to this other school, which was I call it a school. It was more like I think it was a converted house that had been converted into a school, or multiple houses, terraced houses. And I went there, and it was but the thing is, it was 1-to-1 for 1 hour, 4 days a week. So it was not a proper education of any kind, and it was kind of sad, because I had been really good at education, and I was kind of missing out on what I could have done. But it was a chance. Oh, dropped the bed. It was a chance for me to recalibrate and kind of get myself together a bit more, because I had just been miserable and put through a lot. I'd been put through a lot of mental stress, because when I was in the mainstream school, the anxiety and alertness from the sex education had made me become really, really on edge, and therefore I was just always stressing, and then the autism symptoms got worse because of that. I had always had sensory issues regarding sight, sound, and touch, but they got a lot worse after the sex ed, because I was, I didn't have much capacity for anything else. I couldn't mask, I couldn't pretend anymore, I couldn't pretend my symptoms away, everything was fine, school tries to make you do when you're autistic. And, yeah, I managed to get a bit better after that, but then, eventually, my parents realised this probably wasn't working either. And my mum, the absolute goat, managed to get me a place in an autism-friendly school where 50% of the people were autistic. It was an online school as well. So, if I needed to just take a break, I could have rest in my bed because nobody's going to stop me. And the timetables themselves were highly customizable, which meant that the lessons were like the same every single week for everybody. But you could customize the work you did, like the outside lesson work. It's kind of like homework, but since you're at home anyway, it's kind of all blends into one. It's basically just classwork because you don't have homework anyway, particularly if you know what I mean, like no extra work, which is also a bonus. But it was good for my abilities. There was some different types of classes, like different types of like processing needs. So you could get like a higher level class, which I believe they all cover the same type of topics, but the higher level classes just cover them quicker. So I believe I got a lower level class it could be like discussed more thoroughly because I have like a slower processing time. It doesn't mean I'm stupid. It just means I need more time to like think about stuff, and sometimes I think quite deeply about things, which is kind of similar with like YouTube and stuff. And so, yeah, school's going pretty great after this. I managed to get into that school. I felt safer there, and as well as this, there was also, it was very customizable, like what you did and didn't do. So I didn't do obviously biology or sex ed, and I made that very clear with the teachers. And I even had I have a personal mentor. People who go there have a personal mentor, so they can talk to them about what's not going so well at school. So I never have to do sex ed again. Like, oh fucking hell, there's a drown coming after me. I never have to do sex ed again, and I can feel kind of secure. I can keep some of my innocence. So now I'm in a secure place. We've gotten to that point, and now you're probably wondering how I actually continued with my anti-sexual endeavors. Well, I do intend to still cure the OCD, which is, stopping me from going outside, accessing healthcare, basic stuff like that, hating my body. Although, to be honest, bodies are pretty hateable anyway, so it makes sense. But I do like go on online communities nowadays. I've been searching because originally I thought that I had to be asexual because asexual were like only people who didn't have sex. And if you had sex, you were asexual. And if you didn't have sex, that meant you had to be asexual. But that's actually not true, because the other thing that you can be, the other I would say trait, but it's more like an ideology, is, anti-sexualism. And I realized I hated sex, I hated everything to do with it, but I still had the attraction, and I was trying to diminish that. And so I found these communities, and I was so proud of myself. I was so happy that I had found people like me. And I then just, started interacting with people on the forums, and I realized that I was not the only one who felt this way. I've always felt alienated and was bad in talking about this stuff, but now I realize I'm not the only one, and I feel like I have almost a responsibility to be there for people to have mental support, or just so they feel related to you. By making these videos, talking to people online, it feels important. And yeah, that's literally my entire journey from 2023 to now, and even before that. I am finally going to get mental health support soon, and I have joined the antisexual community, and I'm very proud of myself, and I'm very proud of all of the antisexuals out there. Love you all. Bye.